The envelope was tucked inside a Bible, not placed carefully, hidden, wedged between the last page of Revelation and the back cover, like someone had pressed it there in a hurry, hoping it would never see daylight again. I found it 3 weeks after we buried my mother. I wasn't looking for anything. I was packing up her bedroom, folding her clothes, wrapping her perfume bottles in newspaper, doing the quiet, devastating work of erasing someone's physical presence from a room, when the Bible slipped from the shelf and the envelope fell out and landed face up on the carpet. It had my name on it, my mother's handwriting, Serena. Just that. No explanation, no return address. Just my name in her careful cursive, the same handwriting that had signed permission slips and birthday cards my entire childhood. Inside was a key, a small metal key with a paper tag. On the tag was a bank name, a branch address, and an account number I had never seen before. And below that, in my mother's handwriting, 4 words that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. This was always yours. Before I go any further, I need to ask you something. If you found a hidden letter from someone you lost, someone who left you something in secret, something they clearly didn't want anyone else to find, would you open it? Would you follow it? Or would you leave it alone and protect the peace? I genuinely want to know what you would do. Drop your answer in the comments right now before we go any further. There is no wrong answer here, but I think your answer will change by the time this story is over. And while you're down there, tell me where you're watching from tonight. Drop your city, your country, anything, because someone else is watching this same video right now feeling the exact same thing you're feeling, and nobody should feel alone at this hour. If this story already has your attention, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss what we put out next. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who held everything together without ever asking for credit. She was a nurse for 22 years. She worked long shifts, came home tired, still cooked dinner, still helped me with homework, still laughed at things that weren't that funny because she knew laughter made a house feel safer. She was gentle in a way that had nothing to do with weakness. She was gentle the way a person is gentle when they have chosen it deliberately, every single day against every reason not to. She loved Gordon. That is the part that still catches in my throat when I think about it. She loved my father with a loyalty that I now understand he never once deserved. Gordon was charming to everyone outside our walls, the kind of man who remembered your name, shook your hand firmly, made you feel seen at parties. Neighbors liked him, colleagues respected him. At church, he sat in the 3rd pew and greeted the pastor by first name. Inside our house, he was a different man entirely. Not violent. I want to be careful here, because people hear the word difficult and assume the worst in one direction. Gordon was not physical. He was financial. He was controlling in the way that leaves no marks, no bruises, no scars, just a slow, grinding erosion of a person's independence until they cannot remember what it felt like to make a single decision alone. My mother earned a salary, a good one by any reasonable standard, but I never once saw her spend money on herself without first checking with Gordon. A new pair of shoes required a conversation. A haircut needed justification. Every purchase she made passed through him first, reviewed, questioned, sometimes approved, and sometimes denied with a coldness that I felt as a child without fully understanding what I was witnessing. I remember being 12 years old, watching my mother return a coat she had bought herself because Gordon had looked at the receipt and said it was unnecessary. She put it back in the bag without a single word. She didn't cry until she thought I was asleep. I heard her through the wall. I didn't have the language for it then. I do now. Gordon was stealing from my mother, not with a weapon, with a marriage license and a joint account and 23 years of convincing her that her money was actually his. Things got worse as I got older. Not dramatically. There was no single explosion, no moment I can point to and say that was when it broke. It was more like watching a tide go out, slow, steady, irreversible. My mother started working extra shifts in my teenage years, overtime, weekends, double shifts around the holidays. I thought she was saving for something good, a vacation maybe, my college fund, something hopeful. I asked her once why she was working so hard. She looked at me for a long moment before she answered. She said, "Because I want to." She was smiling when she said it, but her eyes were doing something completely different from her mouth. I was 16 and I didn't know how to read that gap yet. I know how to read it now. She wasn't working because she wanted to. She was working because she was terrified. By the time I left for college, Gordon had full access to everything, both their accounts, her pension contributions, her work bonuses. Every financial document in that house had both their names on it, which in practice meant his hands on everything she earned. My mother had her first cardiac episode when I was 24. The doctors said it was stress-related. They said her blood pressure had been dangerously elevated for what looked like years, and that she needed to rest, reduce anxiety, and make significant lifestyle changes. I flew home. I sat by her hospital bed and held her hand and watched my father stand in the corner of that room looking inconvenienced. Not frightened, not devastated, inconvenienced, like her body had failed him by getting sick at an inopportune time. She recovered. She went back home. She went back to Gordon. And 2 years later, she had a second cardiac episode. This one she did not recover from. She died on a Tuesday morning in March. She was 58 years old. And at the funeral, standing at the grave of the woman who had given him 23 years of her life and every dollar she earned, my father did not cry. Not once. Not a single tear. I watched him the entire service. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe I was hoping to be wrong about him. Maybe I needed one moment, just one, where the grief on his face looked real. It never came. He shook hands after the service like he was networking. I drove home alone and sat in the dark for a long time. 3 weeks later, I found the envelope in the Bible. I stood in my mother's bedroom holding that small metal key for a very long time. Then I drove to the bank branch written on the paper tag, and I walked inside and I asked to speak to a manager. It took 40 minutes and every piece of identification I owned, but my name was on the account. My mother had added me as the sole beneficiary years ago, long before she died. The account was mine the moment she passed. When the manager showed me the balance, I had to ask her to repeat it. $41,320. 22 years of overtime shifts, 22 years of extra weekends and holiday doubles, and small, quiet deposits made at branches far enough from home that Gordon would never see a receipt. 22 years of my mother hiding money from her own husband because she knew exactly what he was doing, and she had been building a way out one paycheck at a time. She never got to use it, but she made sure I would. There was a second document in the envelope beneath the key, a printed bank statement, not recent. It was from their joint account, 12 years of it, and my mother had gone through every single page with a highlighter, marking withdrawals, large ones, irregular ones, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, withdrawals that happened on days she was at work, days she was in the hospital, days she was at my school events. She had been tracking him for years. My father had been draining their joint account systematically, not all at once, never enough to trigger alarm, always just enough to keep the balance looking reasonable while quietly redirecting her earnings somewhere she couldn't follow. I sat in my car outside that bank and I looked at 12 years of highlighted withdrawals, and I thought about my mother returning a coat she had paid for herself. I thought about her eyes doing something different from her mouth. I thought about a man standing at his wife's grave without a single tear, and I made a decision. I need to stop here for a second. Because before I tell you what happened at that will reading, before I tell you what I did with everything my mother left me, including the truth, I want to ask you something. If you found out that someone you trusted had been slowly stealing from someone you loved, someone who is no longer here to defend themselves, how far would you go? Would you handle it privately, or would you make sure every single person in that room knew exactly who they had been sitting next to all these years? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you stand. And if this story is hitting you somewhere deep right now, please like this video before we go any further. Share it with someone who would understand. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything to this channel. Now let me tell you what happened next. The will reading was scheduled for a Saturday. Gordon had organized it, of course he had. He had also invited people I hadn't asked him to invite. 2 of his brothers, a cousin, his oldest friend from church. An audience, I realized when I walked in. He had built himself an audience. My mother's lawyer sat at the head of the table. I had called her 3 days earlier. I had told her everything. I had brought her the bank statement with my mother's highlighting. I had brought her the account details, the deposit history, the timeline. She had spent 2 days reviewing it. When she called me back, her voice was very quiet and very precise. She told me what my options were. I told her which one I wanted. Gordon sat at that table like a man expecting a ceremony in his honor, relaxed, comfortable, already behaving like the room belonged to him. The lawyer read the will. My mother had left the house to me. Her personal savings, the joint account, what remained of it after years of Gordon's withdrawals, split between myself and a charity she had volunteered with for a decade. Her jewelry to me, her car to me. To Gordon, she had left one thing, a letter. The lawyer slid it across the table in a sealed envelope. Gordon opened it with the confidence of a man who never once considered that the person he underestimated had been watching him the entire time. I watched his face as he read it. I watched the confidence leave first, then the color, then the composure he had maintained through an entire funeral without shedding a single tear finally cracked. My mother had written everything, every withdrawal she had traced, every date, every amount, every account it disappeared into. 23 years of financial control documented in her careful, precise handwriting, the same handwriting that had written my name on that envelope in the Bible. She had also written something for the room. She had asked the lawyer to read a specific paragraph aloud. The lawyer did. It said that she forgave him. Not for his sake, she was explicit about that. She forgave him for her own peace, in her own time, on her own terms. And she wanted everyone in that room to know exactly what they were forgiving him for. The lawyer read the figures aloud, every one of them. Gordon's brother pushed back his chair. His friend from church stood up and left without a word. The cousin wouldn't look at him. Gordon sat very still with the letter in his hands. I leaned across the table and I looked at my father. Really looked at him, maybe for the first time in my life without flinching, and I said 7 words. She knew. She always knew. She waited. Then I picked up my bag and I walked out. I used the $41,000 my mother had saved to put a deposit on an apartment. My apartment, the first space that has ever been entirely mine. No joint accounts, no permissions required, no receipts to justify. I painted the living room the color my mother once pointed at in a magazine and said she liked. I hung her photograph in the hallway, where I see it every morning when I wake up. Gordon lost the house within a year. Without my mother's income, without her overtime shifts and her quiet deposits and her 22 years of holding everything together, he could not maintain it alone. He moved in with one of his brothers, the brother who left the will reading early. I heard it took some convincing. We do not speak. I do not call. I do not visit. I sent him one message after the will reading, a single line, and then I changed my number. The message said, "I am my mother's daughter, not yours." Before I close this story, I want to leave you with what Diane's life taught me. Not what broke her, what she chose, because my mother was not a victim. She was a woman playing a long game in silence, and she won on her own terms. Lesson 1. Silence is not the same as surrender. My mother never confronted Gordon loudly. She never made a scene. She documented, she saved, she planned, she waited. Some people mistake a quiet woman for a defeated one. They are the most dangerous kind of wrong. Lesson 2. What you build in secret outlasts what you lose in public. Gordon took from her openly for decades. She built something he never knew existed. When she died, everything she had quietly constructed transferred directly to the person she trusted most. He got a letter. Think about that. Lesson 3. Grief shows you who people are. Gordon did not cry at my mother's funeral. Not one tear. I used to think I imagined it. I don't think that anymore. Watch how people behave when there is nothing left to perform for. Lesson 4. Forgiveness is most powerful when it is chosen, not demanded. My mother forgave Gordon in that letter, but she chose the terms, she chose the timing, she chose the audience. That is not weakness. That is the most devastating kind of strength. Lesson 5. Some people will only understand what they lost when they are sitting alone in a room that used to be full because of someone else's effort. Gordon is in that room now. My mother made sure of it without raising her voice once. Which lesson hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments. I want to know which one you're carrying with you after this. Diane never got to spend that money on herself. She never got the vacation, the coat she put back in the bag, the quiet life she had been saving toward one deposit at a time. But she made sure her daughter did. That is who she was. Even at the end, even after everything, still thinking about someone else, still building something that would outlast her. If you have someone in your life like Diane, someone who gives quietly, sacrifices without announcement, loves without conditions, please tell them today. Don't wait for a will reading to understand what they were worth. And if you are someone like Diane right now, holding everything together while someone takes and never notices, I need you to hear this. Your silence is not invisible. The right people see it, and what you build in the dark will find the light eventually. It always does. If this story moved you, hit the like button right now, not for the algorithm, but because Diane's story deserves to be heard by as many people as possible. Share this video with one person tonight. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we have more stories coming, real, raw, and completely unforgettable. And drop a comment below. Tell me what you felt. Tell me which lesson you're taking home. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, so that nobody watching this feels like they're sitting alone in the dark, because you're not. And I'll see you in the next one.